Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, on the line with Steve Hellwig. Does his work with the TSTV campus station there at the University of Texas, one of the few television broadcast stations on campus across the country. Also works for the Daily Texan, reporting sports there, just covered the Texas basketball season. And we also tap into his work with Hustle Belt. It's the SB Nation platform for Mac Sports. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. NFL draft just happened, so obviously it's a great time.
Definitely. So we've got the live chat fired up for the next 25 minutes or so to talk Texas and the MAC in particular. We want to look at what just happened over the weekend. Texas with a much better football team this past season, but despite the losing seasons, the accumulation of talent, maybe not up to Texas standards, but still a wealth of talent compared to most programs. 4 draftees over the weekend, starting with Connor Williams, an interesting story as he goes from Texas high school football to the University of Texas to the Dallas Cowboys, which is obviously a dream for him. Unfortunately, we've lost Steve, but we'll highlight Connor Williams. We talked about him during the live stream last night and his selection to the Dallas Cowboys. Malik Jefferson going to Cincinnati. Deshaun Elliott, the tremendous safety who really impressed me with his play for the Texas Longhorns. Deshaun Elliott, just a playmaker. And then you've got to be really good to be a place kicker or punter selected in the NFL draft, and that's one Michael Dixon. So I believe we've got Steve back. Steve, I'm setting everybody up with Connor Williams and the interesting story that he is for 2 reasons for me, going from Texas high school football to the University of Texas, now to the Dallas Cowboys. Has to be a dream come true for any kid that grows up in Texas playing football. And then number 2, the bullying incidents when he was a middle school age, and then he responded to that and really showed his detractors what he could do. So just run us through the Texas NFL draftees.
You mentioned Connor Williams. That was the first Texas player selected, and I think it's a great fit. You mentioned how he grew up in Texas and he gets to play for Texas and now the Dallas Cowboys. And then you have to factor in how great the Dallas Cowboys blocking and their offensive line has been throughout the years. Although sometimes they've had their struggles. They talked about last year when they played the Falcons and gave up like 7 sacks in that game, and Adrian Claiborne was dominating that Cowboys offensive line. But you join good veterans, guys like Zach Martin on that offensive line blocking for Ezekiel Elliott, who, if he can see the field this year, should be one of the best running backs in the NFL again. So Connor Williams is obviously in a good position in Dallas. And although he played tackle at Texas, his length has been questioned a little bit, whether he is a suitable tackle at the professional level. So a lot of people listed him as guard on draft day. So he might slide and play guard. I don't know if he'll start from day 1 in Dallas, but there's a good chance. It all depends on his performance in training camp and preseason. Then you get Malik Jefferson and Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, that's going to be a big one with Vontaze Burfict suspended again. So Malik Jefferson's probably going to see some early time at linebacker. Has an incredible speed for a linebacker and a great hitting ability. I think Malik's biggest problem has been his coverage in the past, but that's once you have speed, usually man-to-man coverage can become better. He needs to work a little on zone coverage, but he's an incredible hitter. They call him the Predator. Just very good at navigating into backfields and hitting the running backs before they can cross the line of scrimmage. That's a good pick there. Both of those players were juniors who came out early, and so are the other 2 Texas players that were drafted. Michael Dixon fell in the 5th round. It's not every day you hear a punter coming out early, but Michael Dixon was that good. Texas Bowl MVP, which is unheard of. It's been years since a punter last won the MVP, and he deserved that, pinning Missouri deep in that 33-16 win within the 10-yard line almost every single time. He's that good. I know the NFL football, it's a little wider. Michael Dixon actually said in a practice he thinks punting NFL footballs is easier than punting a college football sized ball. So there's that. And he's going to go to Seattle. Seahawks have had John Ryan as their punter for the last few years, but it looks like they're finally going to move on to Dixon. I just don't understand having Michael Dixon, drafting him in the 5th round, having him on your roster and not wanting to use him right away, because punters are usually adapt to the NFL game immediately and can see playing time in their rookie seasons. and there's no reason to have more than one punter on the roster. Then there's Deshaun Elliott in Baltimore. Baltimore's had a veteran defense somewhat in the past few years, have Eric Weddle and Tony Jefferson at those safety positions. Deshaun Elliott was very good cover safety last year. I think he was close if he didn't lead the FBS in interceptions. He has a knack for finding the ball, but a lot of his interceptions that he gets are just in deep zone coverage, right place at right time. He has struggled sometimes in plays where he has to cover man-to-man and with tackling, but he has a very good knack for getting to the ball in time and returning interceptions when needed to be. He kept Texas in that game against USC close last year where USC won in double overtime with a pick six. So Deshaun Elliott's another talented player, left after his junior year, did not play in the Texas Bowl, and he will find a home in Baltimore. So that's it. 4 Texas players drafted. Guys like Holton Hill and Poona Ford had to be picked up in free agency, but a lot compared to the last couple seasons when Texas would only have, I think they had 1 draft pick in 2017, Deontay Foreman, and only 1 in 2016, Hassan Ridgeway with the Colts. This year they got 4, so there's already improvement.
You know, sometimes in the middle rounds of the NFL draft, we see 2 storylines, one being a particular player has all the talent in the world, the measurements are out of the gym, but they didn't produce in college. Or the other story is like a Josie Jewell, a fine linebacker at Iowa, racked up like 450 tackles, but there's questions of whether he has the size and the speed and the athleticism to play at the next level. But on game tape, on game day, he proves to be that kind of player. When you look at Malik Jefferson and Deshaun Elliott, they're guys that leave talent voids and production voids. You're talking about the 2 top tacklers for Texas last year, Malik Jefferson with 110 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Deshaun Elliott, you mentioned the big plays against USC in particular, that being one of the standout plays, but he's a guy that just jumped off the screen the first time I ever knew about him in watching Texas football a few years ago. Just his disruptive play and just wreaking havoc on offense. Had 60-plus tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. For those 2 guys in particular for a Texas defense that was arguably the very best in the Big 12 last season. All right, we got Steve Hellwig on the line. You can join him on Hustle Belt, where he covers MAC football and MAC athletics across the board. Also does work at TSTV. It's the University of Texas campus station there, and also the Daily Texan as well. So the orange and white got after it a few weekends ago, and Steve wanted to get your take on Texas spring football, not just necessarily what you saw in the spring game, but of course 15 sessions before that. And I'm seeing where the play of junior wide receiver Lil Jordan Humphrey in particular, with a couple rushing touchdowns and 7 catches, was particularly of note. But what stood out to you?
The 2 players that stood out, you mentioned one of them, Lil Jordan Humphrey, going for another year. Last year, he's a big receiver, doesn't really fit his name, but he's a big receiver and he can make a lot of plays in both the rushing game and receiving. He's an all-around playmaker. But another guy I think you should keep your eye on, and probably Texas's most talented player on the offensive side of the ball, is Collin Johnson. His name sounds similar to Calvin Johnson, and he can make plays like Calvin Johnson. He's a jump ball type of player in the end zone, strong physical receiver. He, once again, a player that had a great game against USC last year, also had some notable great touchdown catches, one in the end zone at TCU, fighting for a jump ball. He's big, he's strong, he's future NFL talent, and he's staying for his next year will be his junior year, I believe. So Texas is receiving core is definitely deep, even with the transfer of Reggie Hemphill Maps, and they were probably the best position unit in the spring game. The quarterbacks, that's always been a Texas controversy in the past couple years, honestly, since really Colt McCoy, who is Texas's quarterback. And this time it's between Shane Buechele and Sam Ehlinger again, and then Tom Herman's adding 2 freshmen, Casey Thompson and Cameron Rising, to the mix, saying that it's an open quarterback battle between the 4. It seems like it will be Buechele or Ehlinger again, and Ehlinger seems to have the upper hand. I know the coaches love him. He was a Tom Herman recruit. He played last year in the Texas Bowl, as did Buechele. Ehlinger finished the game after Buechele left early, but Ehlinger started most of the games in conference play last year, and I think they'll continue sticking with him. Neither quarterback, I don't think, stood out very well in the spring game, but then you have to remember that spring games of practice, you're playing against your own defense, and Texas wants to continue to have the reputation of a good defense that they had last year and hopefully carry it into the next year. They shut down a lot of Big 12 offenses, held Oklahoma State to 10 points in regulation, held Oklahoma to under 30 points, Baker Mayfield in that offense. So, but Texas loses a lot of pieces. We mentioned the draft picks earlier, Malik Jefferson, Deshaun Elliott. So Texas's defense and finding new guys that can replace these draft picks is going to be one of the key things. Jeffery Mcculloch, if he can stay healthy, is someone who in spring practices seems to be making a big leap. He could play the inside linebacker position this year. They call him the Shark. He was a 2016 recruit, and I think McCulloch is definitely a guy that you need to keep your eye on the defense. And then there's Brecken Hager, who gets a lot of attention, likes to say a lot of things in press conferences that get him some attention over the years, but he's a playmaker too. Had a great, outstanding game in the Texas Bowl last year, constantly hitting Missouri players, forcing fumbles. He was just making plays all over the field. He's the brother of Rams linebacker Bryce Hager. And then another player I'd like to watch on the upcoming defense is Charles Omenihu. He's a defensive end, very good at getting off the line. He's pretty explosive. And now that Poona Ford's off the line and into the NFL as he was picked up as a free agent, I think Charles Omenihu's impact is going to be crucial next season from the defensive end position.
So with the two wide receivers, both juniors to be this season, Colin Johnson and L.J. Humphrey, we're talking about the two leading receivers coming back. Neither one of them had outstanding numbers, but they are the two primary targets coming back. And then at the quarterback position, just considering, I don't consider either Ehlinger or Buechele at this point established. Obviously, they haven't proven that they can be elite, but at least you know that they can make plays at the next level in very different fashions, that they're not going to completely let down the offense, that they've made plays. Obviously, Buechele from a more passing precision standpoint, Ehlinger, a fiery leader, guy that makes plays with his legs as well, seems to fit the Herman offense. But just a huge upgrade over what turned out to be, the Ty Swoops, Gerard Hurd, Kai Loxley, Matthew Merrick, those guys we've seen recent years for Texas football. So whether it's Buechele or Ehlinger, I would expect those two guys to progress. And if one of them is able to beat out the other, I think it shows Tom Herman, knowing offense and quarterback play as well as he does, that he's made the right choice in terms of the fit for his offense and the guy that just played better. I don't expect one of them is just going to be leaps and bounds better than the other, but he's obviously making the decision, and it's a close call at this point between two kind of different style quarterbacks. All right, we got Steve Hellwig on the line from Hustle Belt. Also, you can join him at TSTV, the University of Texas, does his work there for the Texas campus television station, and also the Daily Texan. I know it's a bit of an odd combination when we talk MAC football and also Texas football, but this Steve is covering both currently for the three of those entities there. So we appreciate the time with Steve. He's been on a number of times, including a live report he gave us following the Texas Bowl and the Longhorns win over Missouri. So, Steve, in focusing back on MAC football now, of course, the Power Five gets most of the play during the NFL draft weekend, and then to a certain extent, the Group of Five and variations. The American Conference is pretty strong in the Mountain West. When you go to the MAC, you're talking about roughly the 7th, 8th, or 9th best conference in college football. 5 draftees. Your thoughts about who was taken out of the MAC?
Definitely the MAC. It was sort of a down year for the conference. Once again, a bad year in bowl games, going 1-4, and that certainly didn't help a lot of stocks prospects. The school that had the most draft picks was Western Michigan, who got a lot of recognition in the 2016 Cotton Bowl when they went undefeated in the regular season, won the conference championship, and played Wisconsin. And I think that whole run helped Chukwuma Okorafor's draft prospects, because he was the left tackle for that team that anchored a strong running game with Jarvian Franklin and Jamari Bogan. And Western Michigan, they're an offensive line university in the MAC. For the 3rd straight year, they have an offensive lineman go in the first 4 rounds. Willie Beavers went to the Minnesota Vikings. He's currently on the Seahawks. He went to the Minnesota Vikings in the 4th round in 2016. Last year, Taylor Moton, who played right tackle at Western Michigan on that Cotton Bowl team, he's now playing guard for the Carolina Panthers. He saw some action this year on Monday Night Football. John Gruden really liked what he saw of him in the pros. And then now you have Chooks, as they call him, Okorafor, getting drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think this is another good fit because the Steelers have a lot of good veteran linemen that he can learn behind. He will probably start out on the depth chart as a right tackle behind Marcus Gilbert, but there's a lot of good Pro Bowlers on that Steelers offensive line. You have mentors like Alejandro Villanueva, and then David DeCastro and Marquise Pouncey, who are just annual Pro Bowlers. The Steelers have a lot of good linemen on the roster, and Chooks should be the next guy to get up there. He's 6'6", 330 pounds, huge guy. He's been around the globe, didn't even play football until his teenage years. They said that the first game he ever watched was actually Super Bowl 45 between the Steelers and Packers. He grew up all around Africa and Nigeria and Botswana. And he's just a big tackle, very powerful, but his footwork is great too for a 6'6" type player. Just needs to focus on consistency when delivering his blocks. He probably won't be protecting the blind side anymore in the NFL, shifting to right tackle for his first couple years. And he won't see action on the field right away unless there's an injury, but you always have to be prepared for those circumstances in the NFL. The next MAC player that was drafted was Tyler Conklin out of Central Michigan. He's joining the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have a very solid tight end right now in Kyle Rudolph, a two-time Pro Bowler, so he will line up on the depth chart behind him. But the thing is that the Vikings don't really have a clear backup tight end. They have David Morgan, who's very, very young, and guys like Josiah Price, who's more of a long snapper, former Michigan State player. So it could be easy for Tyler Conklin from Central Michigan to work his way up the depth chart right away. Conklin a lot of the journey before coming back around like week 6 or 7. I remember Central Michigan played Ohio and upset the Bobcats in that game, and Tyler Conklin had 10 catches, about 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just a very good pass-catching tight end. He needs to work on his blocks a little, but he's more of the Antonio Gates type. He was a basketball player like many tight ends, originally played D2 basketball, so he's another one of those guys who can get jump balls, catch them like they're rebounds. He's just a strong physical specimen. Tyler Conklin went in the fifth round, as did Darius Phillips out of Western Michigan. Darius Phillips is actually an NCAA record holder in the most career touchdowns of all time that are non-offensive. He has 12 non-offensive touchdowns in his 4-year FBS career, 2 offensive touchdowns as he started out as a wide receiver. But in the last couple of years, he was the cornerback, the kick returner, the punt returner. He did everything for Western Michigan. He has pick sixes, fumble recoveries, kick returns, punt returns. He had his most notable kick return in college was the one against USC when Western Michigan nearly upset Sam Darnold and the Trojans on week 1. Very fast player. He ran one of the better 40-yard dash times we've seen. So as the Bengals drafted him, he should be their returner immediately, replacing Alex Erickson at that position, I think. Phillips is just too good of a returner, MAC Special Teams Player of the Year back-to-back, and I think he'll see immediate playing time on special teams. Cornerback's a different argument, as Dre Kirkpatrick and guys like that are in Cincinnati still. So it'll be a while before he finds time on defense. Once again, coverage is a specialty. Tackling is not at the moment, but his speed is so great that he has to be on the field right away, I think, even as he was drafted late. And then we have 2 more MAC draft picks. There was the last one picked was Logan Woodside, quarterback from Toledo. Excellent quarterback. I saw a comparison between him and Josh Allen. They say Josh Allen didn't put up that great of numbers in a mid-major conference, but Logan Woodside did, and one is the 8th last pick of the draft, and one's the 7th pick of the draft. Yes, I know Woodside's only 6'2", a smaller specimen, but he has made plenty of great decisions over his college career. If you throw out his final collegiate game, the Dollar General Bowl versus Appalachian State, then everything is almost excellent in his career. He threw 28 touchdowns and 2 interceptions up until the 3 interception game in the Dollar General Bowl last year. and he led college football with 45 touchdown passes a year before in 2016. He's an excellent pocket passer, not much of a runner. In his 6'2" size probably, and his Dollar General Bowl and Combine performances probably knocked him down from about the 3rd or 4th round to the 7th round pick. But he could be Andy Dalton's backup in Cincinnati now that they don't have A.J. McCarron there. Mel Kiper said he likes his future as a long-term backup in the NFL. So Logan Woodside, he's the first MAC quarterback to go since 2014 when the Bengals took Keith Wenning. And I think this was a good decision by the Bengals, who definitely need a backup behind Andy Dalton in case Dalton gets injured or has inconsistent play once again. And the final MAC player that was picked, I skipped over on the 7th, was Quinton Boom out of Ohio. He's an inside linebacker. He's a very good tackler, sort of like Blair Brown, who was drafted by the Jaguars and on that strong Jags defense. He was drafted out of Ohio the year before. Pulling, he can do everything. He can play in pass coverage. But you mentioned Josie Jewell earlier in the broadcast. He's a guy like Josie Jewell who's a little undersized. He's only 6 feet tall, but he's definitely a playmaker. Played well in the Bahamas Bowl when Ohio won 41-6. Pulling, a first-team All-MAC linebacker and one of the best in the conference. And those are the 5 MAC draft picks, a lot less than the previous season. They only get 5 prospects. Only 4 out of the 12 schools were represented, but those are the guys that were selected this weekend.
We're on the line with Steve Hellwig. You can join him on Hustle Belt, covering the MAC on SB Nation. Also, he covers Texas football and athletics with TSTV, the University of Texas platform there, and the Daily Texan, focusing on basketball. Steve, before we let you go, and would love to keep you on for longer, but I need to move on to Michigan and Steve Dace. So anybody watching here wants to get more college football coverage, we'll be on the line in just a few minutes with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast. But wanted to get to a few things in the chat here. One in particular that caught my eye is just somebody commenting that they think that the quarterback play is the only thing holding back Texas. Obviously, the defense was rock solid last year. We've noted the subtractions from the defense moving out of the NFL draft, Jefferson and Elliott in particular. If there would be another cause of concern aside from figuring out the quarterback position, what would be the biggest issue for the Longhorns heading into 2018 for you?
I'll have to say it all has to do with protection in both the run-pass game and the running game. Other than the receivers, I don't think there's a stellar position group on Texas's offense. And then Connor Williams departs, and he has to be replaced by Samuel Cosme, who is a redshirt freshman. He's going to be the new left tackle. Lots of inexperience on the offensive line. They had a lot of holding calls called against him last season, and just regrouping without their leader. Connor Williams was a vocal leader. He was the heart and soul of that offensive line. He missed a lot of time last year, and Texas's offensive line struggled without him. Now they're going to have to play a full season without number 55. And the running game hasn't been too great either. Deontay Foreman wins a Doak Walker in 2016, and they still haven't found really a starting running back since Chris Warren III. He decided to transfer and then decided just to declare for the NFL draft. After that, did not get picked. So Warren is gone, and they have Tennille Carter and Daniel Young. Carter missed the Texas Bowl with a suspension, but Daniel Young played. Looked to be a good receiving running back. Might work his way to be number 1 on the depth chart. They also have Kyle Porter, who gets injured a lot. But Texas's running game has not been very good since Foreman left, and that is one thing that held the offense back a lot last year. Their defense constantly held Big 12 teams to under 30 points, but the offense couldn't get anything going. And I think a lot of that has to do with the inability of the running game and the protection of the quarterbacks.
All right. Anybody on the line with us right now, keep in mind that as soon as we shut down the live stream with Steve, we'll be right back in just a few minutes with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast to talk about Shea Patterson, transfer from Ole Miss to Michigan. The NCAA ruled him eligible just a few days ago. That's the big story for the Wolverines. And then we'll cover Michigan NFL draft and elsewhere for Jim Harbaugh's crew. Steve Hellwig, join him on Hustle Belt, SB Nation. Also does great work for the TSTV folks there at the University of Texas and also the Daily Texan. Steve, we appreciate you dropping by.
Thank you, Mark.